Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new season of Marvelous Movie Mondays. I'm going to show the display names there. There we are. We're Kelsey and Dill.
Oh my
Kelsey's still
god,
Kelsey
my
Claus.
my
I'll
name
fix
is
it. I'll
still
fix it.
from
Yeah, you're good. I'm fixing it. There you go.
from the Christmas
We
draft day.
yeah, listen, it's been a little bit of a slow start to the year for me at least. I don't know if you could say the same, Kels. For example, we're back to our old ways of finding squeezing time in to record at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, which is fine.
Yes.
You're not getting to see this till later on a Monday, so you'll be a little bit more well rested than we are. But happy New Year, Kels! Welcome back. I'm very excited to be back talking with you. This was supposed to be our trivia opener, but Tato and Stacy wanted more time, and I really wanted to respect that as two competitors who wanted to give it their all. So we're going to be doing that at the end of January as our like big kickoff to the trivia season. But we figured this would be a fun way to start the year, talking about a whole series. We've never really done that. We've never talked about a whole series in one episode. We've usually done episode by episode, or we've done like half of a Deadpool season or Daredevil season. So I'm very
Mhm.
excited. So Kels, how are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Jill. I'm really great. Obviously you can see it on my face I'm kind of tired.
Mm.
But that's only because I was up late last night doing my rewatch of all of season 2 of What If. So my notes are definitely all over the place. At the end of our season last season, I did say that I had some exciting news. And
Mm.
it's not that big a deal, but I was excited about it because
Okay.
I was down in the Union Square Christmas holiday market one day and I saw this stand and they had such cute notebooks that I had to get one. So I got a new notebook for
Ooh,
taking notes in this season,
nice.
this nice Spidey notebook. And I was really excited to do that for What
Nice.
If season 2, even though the pages aren't lined. It's a
Oh,
free
okay.
for all on
That's
the
fine.
inside.
So
So
you can also like doodle your thoughts, so you don't have to write them.
yeah, I can
Like,
get creative this
especially for
season,
what if it's animated, instead of writing notes, Kelsey just kind of resketched some scenes in her book. No, that's awesome. I do think we have to touch on some news though before we carry on, obviously, because it has been a little
Yes.
while. The kind of like less important news is that the Golden Globes were last night. There was only two Marvel films nominated for anything. Guardians was up for the best box office movie, which is so dumb because that just felt like an award to be like, oh, let's give Barbie something else. Which I like Barbie. I'm happy it's winning stuff, but it's like,
Yeah,
what a weird category to just invent, especially when there's really
yeah.
no competition. Because like, yeah, Taylor Swift was nominated for her tour, and then you had Guardians and Mission Impossible and Spider Verse, but it's like
Mhm.
I don't know. It just felt weird that like
It
like there was
'Cause,
no
like
competitive point to the category. They were acting as if
yeah,
there's like going to be a win. They should have just been like, here are 10 movies that were great achievements at box office. Here you go. And we're going to give a trophy to Barbie, but like, we're going to shout you guys out. But instead, they built it
right.
up like it was going to be this big event. And then, of course, Spider Verse also was nominated for score and animated film. Didn't win either. But,
What one animated film?
The Boy and the Heron, which
I
I'm
knew
very,
it.
very happy about. But I would have preferred Spider Verse, but still, yeah. What are your thoughts on all that?
I only like I said, I was doing my rewatch last night, so the only category that I watched and cared about, as you can see, was the category Taylor Swift was nominated in. I had a gut feeling that it was gonna go to Barbie just because that movie made $1 billion. But I don't know. I Part of me was holding out hope for Taylor because she did, the Eras tour like destroyed at the box office,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the fall. So, I was just hoping that, I don't know, she'd get a different award under her belt because she's been nominated at the Golden Globes before. She hasn't won anything yet, though.
Right. She
So
was
it would have
nominated for
been
what, like Hunger Games and
she's
Where
not
the Crawdads Sing.
no, maybe for the Crawdad Sing, but she was the two that I know for sure are Safe and Sound for the Hunger Games, and then Sweeter Than Fiction for the other movie that she wrote for. It's called One Chance.
Oh,
It's a
mm,
British film.
mm.
And so yeah, that's the only category I watched. And after Mark Hamill said Barbie, I was like, all right, and then I turned it off. So
Right. Yeah.
I yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because they got a new voting body, like they revamped everything. They made it
Right.
more inclusive,
But it's
more gender inclusive, and they doubled their size of voting body in general. So I think you're getting a more thorough kind of pooling,
Yeah.
a pool of people, which is good because you're not just saying, "Oh, here's our 100 people deciding." Now it at least feels like there's more stakes to it. What were you gonna say, Kels?
No, I was gonna ask a technical question. It's
Mm.
not the Hollywood Foreign Press anymore that does
I don't
it?
think that's the name of what they're going by. It's the same organization, but like they totally revamped it. So
Okay.
I don't remember the name of them, but we have some other people who are like Marvel adjacent that I wanted to shout out that did win though.
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr. won Best Supporting Actor for Oppenheimer. That'll
Nice.
probably happen at the Oscars. She's not an MCU actress, but she is a Spider-Man actress nonetheless. Emma Stone won for Poor Things. I did
Mhm,
finally see your
mhm.
letterbox review for that yesterday, and I am totally in agreement. It's amazing. Paul Giamatti, who was also in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, he was the Rhino in the very last scene of Spider-Man 2. Hey, it counts. Won for The
Nice.
Holdovers for Best Actor, and then I think that is it for Marvel adjacent, but I might be
Oh.
wrong. Yeah, that's it. Oh, Billie Eilish, she's not Marvel adjacent, but like good for her and Phineas
But
as
happy
always.
for her.
Um, Now we can get into like the big news of from when we left, because obviously, of course, when we're not podcasting is when the biggest news that we've been waiting all year for
Right.
drops.
Right.
Jonathan Majors is out. He's out of the MCU officially. He was found guilty. Very upsetting. I'm not sad because I was rooting for him to stay in the MCU. I'm sad because I was rooting for him not to be a shitty person, basically.
Mhm.
But hey, the evidence lies where the evidence lies. Texts are key. Don't delete your texts, people, please. They may come to help you. That's my advice. Not that I keep my texts either because I need to clear up storage, so I'm a little bit of a
Yeah.
hypocrite. But yeah, keep your texts because you never know when they'll come in handy. And I'm glad she did. So yeah, crazy. What are your thoughts on this? And obviously, I know a lot of people first thought was like, "Oh, what does this mean for the MCU?" That should never be anyone's first thought. It should be,
Yeah.
"I hope she's okay. I hope he gets the help he needs in any way, shape, or form." And
Yeah.
it's a shame. But then now, with time removed, we kind of think about the implications of the MCU because, I mean,
Mm.
it was a big key point. I mean, they can't they got rid of Avengers Kang Dynasty. They're just going to call it Avengers 4 now. They're not naming it the Kang Dynasty anymore. They're not recasting Kang. They said they're just going to kind of just phase him out completely, which I don't know if is the best move or not. But given
Mhm.
how poorly received Quantumania was and how the viewership on Loki wasn't as good as it was last year, I think it's okay. I don't think anyone's going to be like, wait, but they never followed through with this plot line because I feel like that happens with several plot
Sure.
lines that don't necessarily pan out. But what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Jill. I definitely hope that all parties involved in this, find some way to heal and move on from this. But yeah, it's it's kind of what we were anticipating all last year,
Hmm.
but even still, because we kept saying, well, he's probably going to get fired, he's probably going to get fired, he's been fired from all these other projects, he's been dropped from all these other things, like MCU is just going to be the next one down the line. um why the MCU waited so long, I'm not entirely sure,
Yeah.
because I think we all pretty much knew where this was headed. But even now, I sit here wondering, like, what they're gonna do. I guess since we're scrapping Kang altogether, I guess who are we gonna make the big baddie for phases 5 and 6 really now? Because we had a whole movie named after Kang, and it just feels like this is like the last thing the MCU needed, because it already felt so
Hmm.
directionless. It already felt so directionless, and we weren't sure what was going on, and now this just feels like the perfect storm of like, okay, and now this has happened. But maybe now we can turn around and do a complete 180 and get some better storylines, introduce some better characters into this, and maybe it's for the better,
Right,
That's
because we all
that's
agreed Victor Timely was the worst part of Loki season 2. So, like,
right,
I
right.
do think, maybe they did dodge a bullet because his performance
Mhm.
wasn't getting better. But I just yeah, I agree. I think them announcing stuff so far ahead of time, I think might be the have to go back to the old way where they don't do that. Maybe announce the
Mhm.
next year of films, because I think that would
Mhm.
add some fun too to be like, oh, I wonder what we're getting next year.
Right.
Instead of like, oh, well, this movie's coming out in 6 years, so how does that affect this? I do think there's an obvious pivot they could do, which is Doctor Doom. You're bringing in Fantastic Four. I think it
Mm.
makes the most logical sense. But we'll see. Maybe they don't even need a big bad. Maybe it's going to be another Civil War thing where we're going to see some of these Avengers turn on one another. Maybe Wanda is still alive, even though Kevin Feige confirmed she's dead, and Elizabeth Olsen hates the MCU now. Like, I don't know. There's a range of possibilities, but I think they're in need of a reset, and maybe this is just the perfect time to just go back to square one. We've been saying that all the time.
Right.
And
Like, go back to the drawing board.
Deadpool 3 may be that opportunity. I mean, they had the strike, so they weren't making anything the last few months. So, like, I think this could be an opportunity where they're like, you know what, let's use Deadpool 3 to just kind of like bring us back to square zero.
Mhm.
But I don't know. We'll see. Um, we do have to talk about What If, though, because we don't have a ton of time. I mean, we do have time, but we have 9 episodes to talk about. But we
Yes.
decided, like, yesterday, we were like, how do we want to do this? Because originally I was like, before I watched the series, I was like, no, we should devote an episode per episode. And then I watched the series, and I was like, yeah, better not. Just because I don't think
Interesting.
no, just because I don't know if every episode deserves a 40-minute
Deserves
podcast.
a
You
whole
know what I mean?
episode. Yeah, no,
And so
for
Kelsey was
sure.
like, let's just like talk a little bit about each one, and then we'll rank them. And what was the other thing we were gonna do about them? I forget the third part.
I was just gonna
Oh,
point out any
Easter eggs. Yeah,
any Easter eggs
yeah,
or any,
because there were a
like,
lot. Yeah,
there's a lot of parallels to, like, things that get said and things that happen in this series that we know in the canonical MCU,
right.
which I think are just fun things to point out, you know?
Yeah. So where do you want to
Um,
start? Do you want to go chronologically, and then we can, or do you want to just give our base thoughts on the season
well,
first?
yeah, Dill, give me your overall thoughts because you don't seem to have enjoyed season 2 all that much.
Well, I didn't really enjoy season 1 very much just because I thought
Okay.
that the anthology nature of it made it so that some episodes were great, some weren't. But then at the end, I
Mhm.
hated how they tried to like connect it all to make it its own
Yeah.
story. I liked the separate of it. And this season leaned a lot more into the connectivity, I think, which made me a little more like, but I did
Okay.
like some parts of it. I think the animation was a step up. I think because they were
Yeah.
just tackling bigger stories. They were doing a lot bigger group stories. It was a lot less individual, like one character meets another character. It was a lot of like bigger groups, like with Nebula's group, and then you had the whole group of Avengers in like the 80s going against Peter Quill. You had the
Mhm.
old Avengers in not in like the what is it, 1860s or something like that. You had the big team up in the last episode, the women team up. So like I think there's a lot of like cool pairings of characters we got this time, or groupings of characters, which was fun to see. I think the voice acting is still solid. I like how they are going with, just if they can't get the real actor, they're just getting someone who can do their best to replicate the voice rather than using
Yeah.
AI, which I think is huge.
Yes.
Because I was worried they would just get Robert Downey Jr. AI, but Mick
Mm.
Wingert comes to save the day. Um,
Hell yeah.
so yeah, I really I thought it was exactly on par with the last season, which I didn't love very much, but like there were
Okay.
moments, but I still am just like, I'm not probably gonna rewatch these unless I'm watching them for trivia. Like, I'm not as enthusiastic as I wish I
Yeah.
had been, considering the premise is still so good, and I just want them to go to just the I think the problem is I would love to see moments in the MCU where there was a big decision where they show the what if of the opposite. Because I feel like a
Mm.
lot of these scenarios are things that I haven't really even thought about. And a lot of them feel
Mhm.
like stuff that could happen. Like, you could do this Happy Hogan storyline in the actual MCU. Like, that's
Sure.
my thing, is it doesn't feel like it's like, oh, this is gonna be a whole new, like, what if this happened instead? Like, I feel like it's just like, oh, let's just put these characters in these different adventures, rather
Yeah.
than let's take an event from the MCU and show us the opposite. I mean, the Ego Peter Quill thing was the closest thing to that, where it was
Yeah.
like, no, instead of being with the Ravagers, he was with Ego the whole time. Like, that's an
Yeah.
interesting premise, but like, we'll talk about it more when we talk about each episode. But that was my overall thoughts. I just don't necessarily think they're getting the most out of this premise that they can, basically.
Right. So, what you're saying is, like, your attitudes like, season 2 didn't make you love nor hate What If any more than you already had. Like, you pretty much
No, it's
still
no.
are living in
I
the
feel the
same
same way.
camp.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
I enjoyed it, but I didn't like
Well,
love it.
yeah, okay, I get it, I get it. I pretty much, like, I feel like I live in the same place as you, like, there's definitely in episodes that I, liked more than others. I thought that this last episode was the wackest thing ever
It
because it
was
just
wild.
felt so, like, random and thrown together, and I'm like,
Right.
"We already explored this, like, I don't need to watch this character anymore." Anyway,
Right.
we'll
No, I
we'll get
agree.
there when we get there. Let's start with, episode 1, what if Nebula joined the Nova Corps? Basically, the premise of this one is if Ronan betrayed Thanos right from the gate and never was kind of like his pawn in the Infinity Stones mission, and it was just like, "Fuck you, I'm taking Gamora, and we're going to take over the universe ourselves." Essentially abandoning Nebula to her own devices, she gets brought in by the Nova Prime, um, who then, takes her under her wing. She starts working for the Nova Corps, and because Ronan is on the loose and wants to destroy Xandar, they uh Xander, sorry, that's a name of a character in a book I'm reading right now. They shield Xandar with with a shield that essentially isolates them from the rest of the galaxy. So Xandar starts falling apart. It's crime ridden. People are going kind of stir crazy. It's very like 2020. It's like Xandar's in their pandemic era. Everyone's kind of shielded off from the
Okay.
rest of the world.
Right.
And yeah, so we kind of get this, like, it's almost like a crime,
It's very noir. Yeah.
like very noir, kind of
Blade
like
Runner.
LA Confidential, like
Yeah.
like a crime thriller kind of episode that I really ended up kind of like enjoying. And I something about the character of Nebula and the way Karen Gillan portrays her, even just vocally, I'm just intrigued.
Yeah.
Like I will always love to watch Nebula because she's
Right.
such a morally gray, like, but not even because she always, like, especially now, like, post Guardians 2, like, she always does the right thing. She might not always do the right thing in order to get there, but she like, her intentions are always there, and I feel like she's like, this episode portrayed her in such a smart, like, way that we don't always get to see Nebula, so I
Yeah.
liked it.
No, I agree. I thought it was good. I like the pairings of characters they brought together because it's like a little bit of the Guardians side of it with Howard the Duck and Groot, but then you also get some of the Thor
Yeah,
side of it with Korg and Meek. Yeah,
yeah,
I thought it was a cool like grouping of characters. I it's weird because like this is not even like a potential they set up in the Guardians movie. It wasn't even like it just felt
mhm,
random. It was like, oh, if Ronan killed Thanos. It was like, oh, that was like on the table. But again, like
sure,
if you're gonna go with a premise that's kind of like out of the left field like this, I like at least stylistically what it brought.
mhm,
I do like the noir setting, kind of the like hard boiled edge to it. And yeah, I think a lot of these shorts or I guess episodes depends on also how much you like the characters and the voice actors. And I think because they really centered it around Nebula and made her the star, I think it worked better than some of the others because of that. Like I like when they really like hone in on one character. I think those are the stronger episodes of these of this my ranking at least. As you'll
yeah,
see later. Like obviously
yeah,
there's a team up in this, but I feel like it's still centered around Nebula, where some of the other ones it's like there's no one who's like really the
yeah,
focal point. So yeah, I liked it, but again, like I wasn't enthused afterwards to be like, oh, that was awesome. Like I was just like, oh, that was
right,
good.
right.
Yeah.
We do have most of the original, actors coming
Mm.
back to voice their parts, such as Peter Serafinowicz.
Serafinowicz. Yeah, that's it.
Serafinowicz, he returns as Garth and Sal. Jude Law even returns as
Yeah.
Yanrog, to, voice him.
There were
We've
two.
got Seth.
I was gonna say there's two big absentees here, right?
Well, the one that I have written down, I'd love for you to tell me the second one, is obviously Nova Prime is not voiced by Glenn
Yeah.
Close. She is voiced by Julianne Grossman.
Hmm.
Who else were you thinking of, Dill?
Vin Diesel's also not in this group. They have
Yes,
different.
Vin Diesel does not voice Groot. I had that written down in a different episode where Groot's in,
Yeah.
but
But
he's
again,
voiced
like
by someone
that's
else.
probably the easiest one to trick us into thinking it's not.
Right.
Like Glenn Close was like, this is not Glenn. To where I almost like was thinking, I was like, is this a new character we haven't met? Is this the same? who is
Mm,
this? And then I looked it up. I was like, oh, this is Glenn Close. And I
yeah.
think that's the one kind of negative to being, recast is that if it doesn't sound or like look that much like the characters. I thought
Mm.
this season there were some characters that didn't really look like their characters. I don't
Well,
know.
I think they
Happy's
do.
the biggest one, which we'll talk about later. But I was like, oh yeah, I forget. I was like, that's Happy.
Right.
Okay, it doesn't look like. I don't know.
Well, because I think they do, like, a cross between animating, like, the character and how it was originally drawn in the comics, and
Right,
also trying to incorporate features that the actor who betrayed them had.
right. Like
But
like
I
Mick
but
Wingard, I think has blue eyes because Iron Man has blue eyes in this series. So
Oh, really?
doesn't he? I don't know. Maybe it was a
Uh,
lighting thing, but there was one shot where it's like, does he have blue eyes? No, I don't know.
sure, maybe. Um, but Nova Prime definitely, like, looked not at all close to what Glenn Close looks like, but, just, like, the long blue the coat and the white hair, like, I guess that was supposed to be
Mhm.
um, telltale signs that it was her. I will say I wrote it down. Fred Tatasciore, I butchering that name, is portrays Groot in this. I
Mhm.
did write that down. I will say though, seeing Nebula kind of take on the role of being like the Yondu of this universe and like getting the fin head and
Mhm.
using the
That was cool.
whistle, and she has his like long like red uh like trench coat almost kind of thing. I was like, Nebula looks really cool in this. Like this like feels like a good place for Nebula in this universe. Some of the just the Easter eggs that I wrote down is that obviously Howard the Duck is running a casino in this Xandar. It was almost reminding me a little bit of like Madripoor, that
Mm.
city that they go to in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That's like, the power broker runs it, and it's like this crime infested city. Um, and so we see Groot playing craps um, in the opening shot, which could be a nod to Iron Man 1, because obviously we know that that's what Tony's playing instead of accepting his Apogee Award in the beginning.
Mm.
Drax is also gambling at the casino. He gets mad and destroys a machine. Meek is some kind of chef. He's like chefing it up at a table, using his knife hands to cut some things up. Korg is a bartender. And I just loved that this quick little quip, like it was a blink and you miss it kind of moment. But when Howard the Duck first sees Nebula come in, he's like, "Oh, waitress, can we get some small bites for the very shiny lady that just came in, or do you only eat mega bites?" Because she's like a cyborg, and I just thought that that was so funny. I was like, "I have to write that down. That's good."
Yeah. Howard the
Also
Duck. You're
in
right.
the in the same Howard the Duck, great. Seth Green, great, having a great time. Also in the same moment, Howard the Duck refers to himself as Big Daddy. He's like, "All right, everybody out. Big Daddy needs the room." And I was like, "Okay." I don't know about
Oh,
that one.
okay.
But did you give this episode a rating, Dill?
No, I didn't. I
Okay.
didn't think to do that, but I'd like to hear
Oh,
yours.
that's okay. Oh, well, I just like I did quick ones. I didn't do them out of 10. I did them out of 5. But I gave this one a solid like 3 out of 5 just
Okay.
because, it wasn't anything super special, but it was still entertaining, and I thought a really solid episode. You know what I
Cool.
mean?
Any other Easter eggs or anything, or you want to move forward?
No, nothing that
Cool.
I pointed out.
All right, so now let's get into what if Peter Quill attacked Earth's mightiest heroes.
Yes.
Yes.
This one I liked. This was like a big jump from the first one. Only even though I only gave it a 3.5 out of 5,
Okay.
I just I liked this one a lot. I thought that it was really smart the way that they, had Peter Quill, but then they also incorporated like a young Hope Van Dyne. So there
Yeah.
was like this dynamic between the two kids,
Mhm.
and like a possible friendship there.
And it's cool to
So
see all the, like, old people,
yes,
become the Avengers essentially, because we've heard so much about how they had all this technology and stuff, but we never really saw
yeah,
them fight. So it's
yeah,
kind of it was fun for that idea. Like, I think that's the charm of this premise for the most part is seeing that group kinda come together and,
yes,
Bill Foster of all people and, like, the King
right.
T'Chaka, like, it's very cool
Yeah, yeah,
seeing who they
yeah.
brought together. So, like, I liked it.
So basically, the premise of this episode is Yondu never delivers Peter Quill to, or he never keeps them for the Ravagers. He does end up delivering Peter Quill to Ego, and then obviously Ego just starts using Peter as this like puppet to take over the universe. But Peter wants to goes on his own quest back to his home planet just because like he wants to be home. He misses his mom. He doesn't want to be under Ego's control anymore. But because Ego has like this, almost telepathic, that's the word, telepathic connection with Peter, he ends up destroying some things along the way. So obviously he's a threat to planet Earth. So they have to assemble the Avengers, which are Hank Pym as Ant-Man, Dr. Foster as Goliath, who is voiced by Lawrence Fishburne.
Mhm.
We have a King T'Chaka gets introduced, and this is very fun when I was looking into the cast of who was playing who. King T'Chaka is actually voiced by, and oh boy, am I going to butcher this, Atandwa Connie, who is
Yes.
actually John Connie's son,
Yes.
who John Connie plays King T'Chaka in Civil War,
Yeah.
as we
Well,
know.
well, he
As
plays he plays T'Chaka in the flashback when they're kids, when they're young. Remember?
Oh, in the beginning of Black Panther?
Yeah.
Oh, makes sense.
Yeah, so it's they cast their son. So, what's his name? Forrest Whitaker's son plays him, Forrest Whitaker, when he's younger, and John Candy's
Oh,
son plays John Candy when he's younger. Yeah, and then Sterling K. Brown
oh,
is there as the other one. Yeah.
that's great. I
Hmm.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
it's very
then
very fun.
the rest of the Avengers team is Bucky, the Winter Soldier, um, and Dr. Wendy Lawson, who's supposed to be embodying kind of Captain Marvel, but she doesn't have any powers. She just has like the scientific knowledge and all that stuff. Um, and also, like I said, we get introduced to a young Hope Van Dyne, who is voiced by Madeline McGraw, who actually plays a young Hope Van Dyne in Ant-Man and the Wasp,
Hmm.
and is also related to sisters with Violet McGraw, who plays young Yelena in Black Widow. So
Yes.
I just thought that this was so fun. What a
Yeah.
what a familial
I love
episode.
Maddie McGraw. Yeah, I loved her in the Black Phone. She was so good in that.
Yes,
She's
that's what I
hysterical.
recognized. I was like,
Um.
I
Yeah. The
because
voice.
okay, the voice they sound so similar, Violet and Madeline, that I was like, oh, did they get the girl who plays young Yelena to voice Hope? So then I like go to IMDb and I'm like, oh, it's Madeline McGraw. I'm like, oh, that must be her sister, and that's why
Yeah.
they sound so
The
similar.
way I separate them, it's like one's Black Phone, one's Megan. One's the little girl Megan.
Yes.
So it's like, yeah, that's how I differentiate. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
young
yeah.
Yelena is Megan, I think. Yeah. The only big absentee here is Annette Bening, right? She's not playing Dr. Wendy in this
Yes,
one. It's someone else.
it is Carrie Tom Tom Tombazian. I can't
Mhm.
read my own
Gotcha.
handwriting, but
Which
it
was
is
another
not
one where
Annette
I was
Bening.
like, "Who is this character?" I'm trying to figure out, have we seen her before? And I was like, "Oh, it's Marvel," but I just didn't
Yes.
connect that. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I wasn't she bad? Listen, it's been a while since I watched Captain Marvel, but wasn't she bad in Captain Marvel? Isn't she like a bad guy?
Well, she's
Or
at
does she
like
play the
Carol
Supreme
does.
is the Supreme Intelligence someone different?
No, no, no. So, she, like Carol, starts as a Kree soldier, but then kind of like discovers she doesn't want to be Kree anymore because the Kree are the bad guys. So she like goes to Earth to just be like she pretends like she's just a
Gotcha.
human woman, and then
Okay.
she works for the she works for the Air Force, and she's doing all the experiments with the Tesseract and like Project Pegasus and all of that. So she becomes Carol's mentor. So the
Right.
reason why
Okay.
you see her as the Supreme Intelligence, as Carol's Supreme Intelligence, is because she's the mentor that she had on
Right.
planet
Okay.
Earth, but
Gotcha.
Carol doesn't remember that.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So
Cool. Yep.
yeah.
That's all I need to know because she was the one character where I was like, "What?" I forget what her deal is.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. It was fun. It was just cool seeing these characters together because I feel
Yeah.
like it added a fun dynamic. Even though I still hate Hank Pym. I'm sorry.
What, it's funny that you say that, Jill, because my biggest complaint about this episode is that it was just so overly quippy and
Hmm.
so like there was just too many just like one-liners and like nothing actually getting said, that like I can understand why this, if you're already a Hank Pym hater, that this one would definitely like fuel that hatred, just because like I just felt like they were all just, it was all too much like, oh, thanks big guy, and like you're going to be the crusty one, and like blah blah blah, like
Yeah.
joke about what's happening right now. And I was like, okay, I'm like, maybe this is what the Avengers, like the original Avengers, is like in 2012. But like, I can't remember that. Maybe I just watched that movie with rose-colored glasses. But I was like,
Mhm.
huh, they're really feeding into this like stereotypical like superhero film dialogue happening here.
Yeah.
Um, but overall, I really like the premise. I like that, Peter ends up not being the actual bad guy, that he just like genuinely wants to get back home to Missouri. And, Hope kind of like sees the child like it almost takes like the night nativity naivety the naivety of
Naivete.
naivete of a child to kind of see that in him, and
Mhm.
it kind of changes the focus for the group of Avengers. I like that um Howard Stark, they even got John Slattery to be
Yeah.
Howard Stark in this,
Couldn't believe
and
it.
Haley Atwell is still obviously going to be Peggy Carter for the remainder of this entire season.
Yeah. Big
Um
character. Big character in What If season 2. Big character in What If season
yeah,
1, but really a big character in
but
season 2.
really a big character in season 2, and I'm happy for her. I loved it.
Yeah. All right.
Um
Any other Easter eggs? Yeah.
so Yes. So the first thing that I wrote down is that while first of all, the big fight sequence at the beginning of the episode takes place at Coney Island, which we know that happens also in Spider-Man: Homecoming. Um, Peter like takes a raccoon doll. It almost looks reminiscent of Rocket
A little bit,
Raccoon, but
yeah.
maybe it's just because it's a raccoon. Um, Peter, a young Peter Quill is also voiced by Mace Montgomery Mescal. I wrote that down. Um, we see Hope obviously with her own Walkman. Her our introduction to her is waltzing and singing the song "Never Surrender" by Corey Hart, which was just like it felt like a great like integration of like an Avengers movie and a Guardians movie, just like with the use of the time period and the music and everything.
Mhm.
Um, at the end of the episode, um, while they're celebrating their victory, they're drinking beers, and Thor shouts, "Oh, I like it, another!" like he does in Thor
Mhm.
1. And yeah, that's all I wrote down for
Cool.
this
All right,
one.
let's jingle the bells, Kels. Let's go to what if Happy Hogan saved Christmas,
I will not be
aka
jingling
what if
any
Happy
bills.
Hogan became a Hulk of his own, kind of,
Right.
aka Die Hard,
Hey, hey, Die
which
Hard.
probably was made you thrilled. I'm sure watching this on Christmas.
It's
Kelsey probably doesn't think this is a Christmas episode, but it's still a Christmas
okay.
episode to me. Kels, what do you feel about this one? I mean, this one's probably the most straightforward one. It's
Um, this one I like just because I liked the dynamic between the dynamics happening between what's her name? Darcy and Happy Hogan. I think that
Give me
they're like
you keep talking, give me 1 second though, because there's, like, drilling going on. I think they might be doing construction, so I just wanna listen to it. Hold on. Keep talking.
okay. Yeah, I really liked the dynamics between Darcy Lewis and Happy Hogan. Just because I feel like those are two characters that I think would like get along really well, but we haven't seen them actually like interact.
Mhm.
I love the thematically, I loved the Christmas setting. And don't we're not getting into this.
Okay.
We're not getting into this debate, okay? I'm just here to talk about
No, I know.
episode 3 of
I know.
What If.
No, I know.
Um, and so,
No, I mean, I
yeah,
won't yeah, no, I won't get in that debate. I was just curious watching this. I'm like, because it's yeah, I was curious. I was like, there's no Santa, there's no I was just wondering if you would consider this like a Christmas episode or if it's Christmas if it just happens to take place on Christmas, but we'll get into that debate another time. I was just very
okay.
curious because I was like, I wonder what the difference between this and that is going to be. But we don't have to get into it because we also don't have much time. So, yeah, I liked it though. It was fun. This
Yeah,
was just a fun one.
it
Again, this
was
is kind of falls under the blanket of like this was never really like a branch off of what we already got in the MCU. It just felt like a
right.
random one off, but also like
Yeah,
I feel like you could still do this. Like if John Favreau's down, you could do a plot
sure.
line where it's Christmas. Like I feel like they could do this.
Yeah.
Like I didn't feel like it was too much of a departure from the regular MCU, but it was fun
Um,
nonetheless. Good to see Justin Hammer back.
yes, I was just gonna say, like, the main antagonist is like it felt kind of random that it's Justin Hammer, But then again, like, I love Justin Hammer and I love Sam Rockwell, so, like, I was like, "Great," but then have him be the one that takes over Avengers Tower. I love it. Let's do it. And so
Right.
his main mission in this is to get the Hulk blood because he's like, "I'm already smarter than 10 Tony Stark. I want to be stronger than 12 Captain Americas." And so he
Right.
wants to get the Hulk blood. To stop him from doing that, Happy Hogan accidentally injects himself with the Hulk blood, so he kind of becomes this big, monstrous purple Hulk um, who doesn't know his own strength. We basically have all the original cast come back, obviously, except for Tony, Kath, and Nat. But Kobe Smulders is back as Maria Hill. Sam Rockwell is back as Justin Hammer. Jeremy Renner's in there as Clint Barton, and Mark Ruffalo is Bruce Banner. Um, it's fun. I wrote down some Easter eggy things. Uh, so the first Oh, right. Okay. So the first thing we see is that, as Happy Hogan is calling for help, he's trying to reach all the different Avengers. The first person he calls is Natasha, who is at the ballet during a production of the Nutcracker, probably on her own side mission, trying to stop someone from doing something bad. I think like an ex or another widow, maybe from the Red Room. And I just thought that this was really cool that they kind of made her like the ballerina type character in
Mm.
this um episode, just because it's kind of like a wink wink nudge nudge to, as we know, part of her training in the Red Room was ballet training, because we get that in the flashbacks in Avengers Age of Ultron, I believe, when she's like flashing back to what happened to her in the Red Room. Also, when he tries to get a hold of Tony Stark, but there's soccer moms fighting over Captain America, and in the same vein, there's a bunch of kids fighting over a Tony Stark doll that Clint is trying to take him for his kids, but Bruce Banner's telling him, like, no, give it to the other children. There's plenty of other dolls. And it's just so funny and almost kind of sad that all of the Tony Stark dolls are pretty much gone. But the next aisle next to them are the Clint Barton dolls, which are fully stocked. So everybody wants a Tony Stark doll, but nobody wants a Clint Barton
Oh.
doll. And I'm just like, that feels a little too real. Maybe we should have illustrated something else happening there.
Right.
Um,
That's funny.
at some point, Justin Hammer said once he captured Darcy Lewis, and so she couldn't help Happy anymore. Justin Hammer said, "I got your girl Friday," which I thought was interesting because I'm like, oh, Friday, so like the other AI that takes over when Jarvis becomes Vision. It was just, or I don't know if I'm missing a reference there or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
We see a Hulkbuster slash Veronica Hulk fight, which is very
Mhm.
reminiscent of Avengers Age of Ultron in South Africa. It was very quick. I got it on the second rewatch. I'm glad. This is why I watch these things twice. But while talking to Maria Hill, Darcy Lewis drops the line, "Oh, I learned this when I was interning for the Culver University IT department," which is the university that Betty Ross works at in the
Mm.
Incredible Hulk in
Mhm.
Virginia. Um, Tony Stark says "son of a nutcracker," which I thought could have been like, oh, is that a wink at Elf that John Favreau directed and also starred in? Could be. Um, and yeah, that's all I wrote down for this one. Oh,
Yeah.
they also recreate. There's a quick moment where the Avengers come in at the end to save the day, where they recreate the slow motion Age of Ultron shot of them
Right.
all kind of like bursting
Mhm.
through the walls, which I thought was like, that's a great shot. So
Mhm.
good, good on them for
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
But
Well, let's
I gave this episode the same one that I gave the Peter Quill episode, which was a 3.5 out of 5. So I liked
cool.
them pretty much the same.
Yeah, there you go.
Episode
So let's
4.
let's burst into this, or let's crash into this next one. What if
Yes.
Iron Man crashed into the Grand Master? Another one that's like kind of like, all right, it's a little it's a little random. But
Yeah.
I like it. This one for me just kind of was like more forgettable, I think, just because
Right.
it was like, See, that's the thing is a lot of these are like, oh, that was nice, then you move on. Like there's not a lot to talk about for me for this one. It's
Mhm.
just like it was fun to see the banter most of all. But when you
Yeah.
don't have Robert Downey Jr. there, I mean, I think a little bit is lost, even though Mick Winger does a good job.
Mhm.
It was fun, the car racing and stuff, but like I ultimately left it not really feeling much.
Right. I mean, so the premise of this one, Dill, is if Stark never made it out of the wormhole and he was kind of like shot into Sakaar and basically ends up like living out the Thor Ragnarok plot that
Hmm.
Thor lives and kind of is like trapped on Sakaar until he like proves his way to the or like gets in the good graces of the Grand Master. Of course, like Tony Stark has other plans and challenges him to a race, an intergalactic NASCAR, as he puts it, and ends up being able to leave, which I thought was like, like fun. I thought that this was a creative idea of like what would the main attraction be for the Grandmaster before like getting the Hulk? Because I feel like maybe because like Thor Ragnarok happens, like the Hulk lands there and he's like, "Oh great, I'm just going to get a bunch of people to try to fight this guy." And like that becomes his like big spectacle. So this is kind of like before he gets the Hulk, like,
Hmm.
oh, his big spectacle is like doing these drag races. Um yeah, we pretty much have all the original cast. Jeff Goldblum is there to voice the Grand Master, which would have been a devastating loss
Yeah,
had it not been Jeff, I think.
yeah,
Tessa Thompson's there as Valkyrie. Rachel House is back as Topaz. We get another um, Korg Taika Waititi feature, and another character that we get introduced to who was featured in last season but not talked about until this season is Gamora.
yeah.
And she is not voiced by Zoe Saldana. Unfortunately, she is voiced by Cynthia K. McWilliams. But I still think that she did a pretty good job at embodying, um, you know, Zoe Saldana's take on Gamora. Um, so yeah, we
Yeah. There's not much else
Uh,
to say, but
I
yeah,
mean,
that's
my
good.
my biggest complaint about this one, Dill, is that I'm kind of over any storylines that explore just the six Avengers
Right.
because we have so many other characters now that I would love it if we just got like if this was an episode like just about Gamora or literally like any other character. I'm like Tony Stark has gotten his time to shine. Like I've had it, he has 3 whole movies, he's in most of the MCU, he has his own what if episodes in season 1, like, I'm ready to, like, move on from exploring different paths for
Right.
him to take, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah,
Um,
that's how I kind of feel about the next one we'll talk about, but we'll get there.
yeah, the only Easter egg that I wrote down is that at some point, uh when uh Tony, Korg, and Gamora all get trapped in what looks like a honeymoon suite on Sakaar, and like Topaz is like, "Oh, he sensed a connection between the two, like you, like why don't you explore this?" And he's like, "Okay, but then why is Korg in the corner here?" I thought that this sequence was very funny, and
It
he's like,
was.
"Oh, just pretend I'm not here. I'm just a pile of rocks with eyes." And I'm like, "Whoa, what's happening? What are we setting up here right now?" And so Tony goes to escape and he's like, "Well, I'm not sticking around for Dr. Moreau's Hunger Games." And I was like, "Huh." Well, first of all, I wanted to make sure that I'm like, okay, the Hunger Games did come out in 2012, so I guess Tony Stark would know what the Hunger Games are. But I was like, what
Yeah.
what is this Dr. Moreau character? So I looked into it,
The
and
Island of Dr.
basically
Moreau, yeah.
the island of Dr. Moreau, exactly. So Dr. Moreau is this mad scientist who creates human-like hybrid beings from animals. And I read that and I was like, huh, that reminds me of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. That reminds me of the High Evolutionary.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. Oh, and then at the end of the episode, basically Gamora and Tony pull a ruse on Thanos, and it's like Gamora's like, "Look, I brought you the one Tony Stark," and he's like, "Ah, daughter, love you," and then they kill him together, or you don't actually see it, but it's implied that like maybe they stop Thanos right then and there. Um, oh, and this is the only episode with a post-credit scene where you see the Grandmaster all melted from the smelt stick, and he's begging for to be sponged up. He's like, "Oh, somebody come sponge me up. I want to
Mhm.
be sponged up." And I'm like, "Okay."
I want to be
Anyway.
sponged. Yeah,
Yes,
Chef
that's
Goldblum
way
says it.
better. See, thank you. Thank you for the
Sponge me up, sponge me. Yeah.
Yes, still, you're so good. Oh my
Come
god,
on,
thank
come
you.
on. Yeah. All right. what, what if Captain Carter fought the Hydra Stomper though, Kels? This is a
Okay.
continuation kind of last
Yes.
season's episode, right? Which again, I'm like kind of like I just wish they were their own one-off things. And I did really like this episode on its own,
Yeah.
but I think when you
Yeah.
watch the whole season, I had a complaint about it, which we'll get to, I guess. I guess I could say
Okay.
now. How many
Sure.
times this season does she need to decide whether she's gonna save or kill her freaking boyfriend? And how many times
Yeah,
are they gonna
yeah.
recycle the same exact thing to where, like, the third time I watched it, I'm like, now it doesn't mean anything.
Sure,
But I
sure,
guess it
sure.
means something the first time here, I guess, when like she has to make that ultimate sacrifice at the end, and like the Watcher's like, it was a sad ending. But like the rest of
Right.
it, then they do it like two more times in two
Yeah.
different episodes. I'm like,
I mean,
oh my god.
I personally think it's just to mirror that push and pull that Steve and Peggy have in the canonical MCU, but it's like reversed to see it, within Peggy's eyes.
Yeah.
But they're pretty much like they both have the same morals and they're pretty much the same person. So it's not that much different for them to be like, oh, well, by the last episode, she's like, I would never do all this to bring back Steve. He wouldn't want me to. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly the decision that Steve would make as well. Like, neither one of you are making a different choice here, which
Yeah.
so I can understand the
Yeah,
complaint.
I also didn't
I
like the ending where
personally
she like fell through the portal. I'm like, all right, now we're gonna just connect all these episodes again. But whatever.
right. But then anyway, we really went off the rails at the end of the season. What I really liked about this episode is that I love how it's basically just Peggy Carter exploring the Winter Soldier plot line, but
Hmm.
instead of Bucky being the Winter Soldier, it's Steve as the Hydra Stomper and
Yeah, I like
trying to
that.
like deprogram Steve um from, being controlled by the Red Room. I also love like the addition of Melina as, the leader of the Red Room and how that kind of like um, you know, how she has to have this standoff now with Natasha and Peggy having the standoff with Steve. It was this episode. This is the first episode I really, 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 really liked. I gave this one a
Mm,
4 out of 5.
okay.
It almost made me wish that we explored this canonically in the MCU. I'm like, if
Right.
Black Widow just got her own movie when she was supposed to, and I don't know, if Peggy Carter was Captain Carter, like this would have been so cool to
Yeah.
watch and explore in like a full length feature film, I think. And it just bums me out that we have to kind of settle on, this animated series to get like truly diverse and inclusive episodes like this. Because imagine Winter Soldier but led by two women. That the world wasn't ready for it.
Been cool. Any big Easter eggs or no?
Let me look at my notes. Well, I did find it interesting that Bucky was the Secretary of State instead of,
Hmm.
Alexander Pierce. We got to see an old man Bucky. We never get to see Bucky age, which I thought
Right.
was,
That was cool.
interesting. Oh, the whole sequence in, like, the town, like, the fake town that's made, um, the Sokovian military base that they built to make a US town was, like, such an interesting, atmosphere that I would have loved for them to explore. It was like, Peggy Carter said it herself. She felt like she was in a horror movie. And I was like, "Ah, see, that's like a different take that I feel like we could explore in the
Right.
MCU." Um, at some point, this isn't an Easter egg, but Melina, like, meets Peggy Carter for the first time, and she's like, "You're a woman, who's been like made by scientists. I can't tell if I want to kiss, kill, or dissect you." And I was just like, "Oh, okay." And she's like, probably like all three." And I'm like, "That's really bold. That's a really bold line." To include. And then, like, as you said, Jill, that, this episode ends with her getting kind of kidnapped by the Scarlet Witch and someone else with an eye patch and a mustache, who I'm embarrassed to say I didn't know who was at first. I was like, that guy looks like a pirate. Who could that be? But we'll get there when we get there. Let's talk
Wait,
about
wasn't
my
it who wait, iPad. Isn't it Nick Fury?
yeah, it was Nick Fury, but I didn't
Okay.
know that at first. I literally was like, "Who is that?" The mustache was really throwing me off.
Right, right, right.
The
Okay.
mustache and, like, the old-timey clothing, I was like, "Who is that?" My brain was
Okay.
broken.
Okay.
But
Cool.
I'm really excited to talk about my actual favorite episode of the series,
Yeah.
spoiler alert,
I
which
mean,
is episode 6.
this is like kind of the universally like I agree, it's my favorite too. Like just because,
Okay, great.
yeah, it's what if Kahori reshaped the world? I mean, this one was. I just think in terms of just conceptually and like
Mhm.
writing and direction and characters, this was the strongest one. Also, because
Yeah.
it felt like its own thing. It didn't feel like it was trying to connect, which they
Yeah.
later try to make it connect. But the one complaint I have though is like why you have this amazing character, this amazing indigenous representation. Why are you
Mhm.
saving it for a 20-minute episode in an animated series that half the MCU fan base is just not going to watch? Let's be honest. I mean,
Right.
most of our trivia competitors don't watch What If. Like what
Uh-huh.
why are they doing that now? Like why not just give her own movie? And that's what my whole thing is. I'm like, this could be like such a cool, interesting character. Now you kind of wasted this origin, and unless they're just doing an origin here because they're gonna make her a more mainstay in the MCU. But I'm like, this is
Yeah.
probably the most interesting representation you've had in the MCU in a long time.
Yeah.
Even more interesting, I'd say, than like the Black Panther stuff and Shang-Chi stuff. Like, because we've had movies with those types of heroes where we really don't have a lot of indigenous stories. You know, we've
Right.
gotten Killers of the Flower Moon this year. We got the Prey, the Predator prequel last year, which was amazing. But like, that's the only other big mainstream ones I could think of. Like, I just hate how they wasted it in this episode. And like, I honestly feel like because it's in this series, it doesn't have as much power as it could even have. Like, I think it could be even
Mhm.
better, but because it's kind of in this series, it just kind of feels like the stakes are less. And I feel like it just feels like, you know, oh, here's a cute story we're gonna tell instead of like this is like actually important and this means something. I still liked it a lot, but I feel like
Mhm.
it did it a disservice having it in this particular season, I guess. I don't know. It just felt so random, but I wish it was given more than just a random treatment, you know?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I totally get that. My hope is that this is, to set up like a real Kahori in the MCU. I'd love to see this character, in real life in the on the big screen. Um but I just thought that visually and conceptually it was just so stunning. Like this
Mhm.
one had like I feel like the prettiest visuals out of
Yeah.
all the episode. And with just like so, we're in the new world before it gets colonized, and in this universe it never gets colonized because Kahori is falls into the Forbidden Lake where she ends up in the sky world that they call it, where they're all kind of influenced by the powers of the Tesseract. So she's able to get these powers to stop colonization from ever happening, which
Yeah.
is
Such a
just
cool idea.
such a cool idea. And like it's yeah, I just
Yeah,
feel like it's
because
such an important and
yeah.
unique story to
'Cause it's not
tell.
even an MCU what if, it's more of like a real world what if. Like, what if this happened in
Yeah.
history that's different? Which I
Yeah.
like, but they, I think because it's a new character, they almost did it a disservice. I wish they had just like
Mhm.
but I get it because it's like the what if banner of that. Like it makes sense that they put it in this series. But like I would have just loved, even if it's animated, it doesn't even have to be live action, but do an animated film of this, or a
Mhm.
special at least. I would love to see more of this character. And I think it's a disservice because if they do ever bring her in live action, I'm worried they won't do an origin story because people will
Yeah.
have supposed to seen this and then people will just
Right.
not care or not see it. And maybe that's
Right.
their worry is that their people aren't going to show up to box office for an indigenous story. But I would. I don't know.
I would. Um,
Yeah.
well, if they do end up doing a live action story featuring Kahori, you don't even have to watch the whole season. You just have to watch this 30-minute episode,
Right.
and it's the best one anyway.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe we can convince MCU fans, if they're going to check out What If at all, it's to check out this episode.
We're just gonna have to make a
Um,
lot of trivia questions about this episode so people feel
Yes.
like they have to watch it.
So we force them, we trick them into watching it.
Yeah.
Obviously, as far as Easter egg stuff goes, it's a brand new character. It's a character written for the MCU. She's not even from the Marvel comics. So
Right.
it's,
Which is also
there's
super
not
cool. Yeah.
much to explore there, but I will say that my favorite scene was when, she goes to Isabella, the Queen of Spain, because obviously these are Spanish colonizers that are coming
Mhm.
over to the New World, and so she goes there, and she doesn't like threaten war. She basically just threatens peace. Like she's like, we will have peace, or else I will pick off everyone, every soldier that you ever send my way. Like, it will not be good for you. And I love how she gets the queen out of her throne. She's like, I didn't come here for a throne. Like, if anything, like you being in that throne is more problematic for anybody else here. And so she just like picks up the throne with her powers and like crushes it. And I was like, oh, that's good. Like, because it's just such an underdog story that like there's no choice but to root for them and to root for the goodness
Yeah.
um, that is this Kahori plotline, but
Oh,
it was easily my favorite of the
yeah, me too.
season. Oh, and at the end, um, Dr. Stephen Strange comes in and is like, "Oh wow, you've solved world peace, but now I'm here and I've been looking for you." So I wonder what's gonna happen after
Yeah,
that.
it's like, I hate the connectivity. The whole point is that they're one-offs. Anyway, all right. What if Hela found the 10 rings, Kels? This was, spoiler
Yes.
alert, my least favorite episode. Just because
Okay.
I just never really I don't like Thor Ragnarok very much, and I just have never really loved Hela. I like Kate Blanchett a lot, but I've always felt like
Mhm.
Hela's kind of one note. So I appreciated that they were trying to like give her more of like a cool character arc of, oh, what if she went to Earth instead of Thor? But it
Mhm.
just, I don't know, for some reason I think just I look at this one and the Nebula one together, whereas like I think Nebula is just, I'm so intrigued by that character where I was so in it, whereas here I was just like,
Mhm.
I didn't really care much. I don't know. And then she goes through the whole like Ta Lo thing with the 10 rings. I don't know. It was
Right.
interesting, but like I never really got that sense of like, oh wow, this is such a cool idea, cool premise. Like I thought it was interesting, but like I don't know.
It's Yeah, I mean, the thing about Hela Dill is that I like that from Thor Ragnarok, we learned that basically, like, she was just so evil and so unchanging that she had to get sent to hell. Like, there's
Right.
no, "Oh, I'll give you a second chance if you can change your ways on planet Earth." There was like, "Whoa, you're the baddest of the baddies.
Right,
I'm
and
sending you to hell."
I'm fine with that because it's like we
Yeah,
need some baddies who are just bad. Like you don't need everything to
exactly.
be a Disney movie of, oh, but they've got a little good in them,
Right,
you
like,
know?
they're able to change, like,
And
no,
that's what
like,
I feel
some
like this
people
was
can
trying to
just be
show. I'm like,
evil for the
yeah,
sake of being evil,
yeah.
but what I was confused on this episode that I found myself asking out loud was, so what does she want? Because she
Right.
starts this friendship with Wenwu because Wenwu kinda sees something in her where it's like, "Oh, maybe we shouldn't kill her or imprison her, she seems kinda useful because 'cause she's got all these cool combat tricks," like, whatever, um and then they kind of have this friendship, but then she escapes to go to Talo. And then while at Talo, she's like, well, I want to learn your ways because I want to take down Wenwu. But also, it's more to take down my father. But, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. And I'm like,
Right. It was just weird.
I'm like, what is the plot line here? I'm like, you need to give this character a clear objective, or else I'm not going to be able to follow this story or
I
be able
think
to root for her at all.
I think they got Kate Blanchett and we're like, well, we got to make the most of it. I think that's literally what it is. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
really think she was probably the most paid of anyone who did it, probably if I had to guess.
yeah.
So like I don't know. I feel like it was just kind of like we need to use her. How are we gonna do this? Like it just felt, yeah, like what you said. It kind of felt like they made it up as it went along.
Yeah, it just felt like it was just yeah, so then she has this full 360 by the end of the episode and she spares Odin in combat and is like, "Listen, I don't need to solve everything with bloodshed. I'm going to undo what you did. I'm going to free the realms because through the training at Talo, she kind of realizes that the thing that she wants isn't like death and destruction. The thing that she wants is to be free from her
Mm,
father
yeah.
and free from being under Odin's thumb. Which like I get, which like I was like, okay, so but that direction didn't feel very clear. And if you're gonna make it a plot twist, then it needs to be more of a mystery. I don't know. I just yeah, this one uh, the best part of this episode is that I don't know if it's exactly Morris, Trevor Slattery's pet from Shang-Chi and the
Yeah, I
Legend of
don't
the
know.
Ten Rings, but it's a creature like Morris that Hela is able to talk to, and it's like
Yeah.
she says this one line that's rather funny. She's like, "Well, I guess this isn't the first ass that I led in that's led me into battle, or that I followed in battle or something," because
That's
she
good.
can't tell if she's talking to the front of it or the back of it. So she's like, "Oh my god."
Yeah. No,
um,
I
but
agree.
that was
That was a
fun.
fun moment. Yeah. So,
That's the only Easter eggy thing that I have
cool.
is that
All right.
Morris was there.
Well, what if the Avengers assembled in 1602, Kels? Um,
Okay,
you
sure,
you you
sure. What if?
you see, you've been alluding to the fact that the season kind of goes off the rails, and I think like it goes off the rails in the last episode, but I still really enjoyed this one just because
Okay,
I think there's a fun premise there with them all being like kind of old school,
old
like they all have
timey.
swords. Like I love Scott
Yeah,
Lang in this episode. Scott Lang's the
yeah,
best part
yeah,
of this
yeah.
episode. I
That's
really just think it's like, you know what? If you're gonna do a big Avengers thing and you're not gonna really focus on one character and you're gonna focus on them all, like do something so different. Like zombies was that last year, where it's like this
right.
feels like the zombies episode where they're just going so out of left field. This one I feel like it could have been even more out of left field. Like I would have liked it if it was all like Shakespearean dialogue.
Yeah,
Whereas it still felt like some of the slang was a little modern. There was a little
yeah,
inconsistency there, but I just liked the premise of it. I thought it was fun. Prince Loki being a Shakespearean actor, I wrote down.
yes,
We still get Hogan now as like a villain, and he's also the
yeah,
Hulk again, which was weird. I was like,
yes,
so in this multiverse, it felt more multiverse than it was like
yeah,
what if, like a different timeline for the real heroes. It was more like what if in this multiverse, which I feel like is just kind of a cop out of the premise again. But the more I'm talking about it, the less I like it. But I still like
right.
it. It was the most entertaining
Yeah,
to me. It was the most entertaining to me.
it was an definitely an interesting concept, but I think the more like it when you take a step back, you're like, "Oh, what an interesting concept." But then when you get closer to the picture, you start to realize that none of the colors really go together, and you're like, "Wait, what's happening here?"
Yeah.
Um, because yeah, the
Hold on. You
happy
talk. I'm listening. I just
storyline.
need to grab water because my throat's
Sure, sure,
drying
sure.
up.
Happy Hogan being kind of the antagonist almost in this storyline and then becoming the Hulk again was where this episode kind of lost me. But I will say that there were um there were some highlights of this episode for me. So basically the concept of it is like, oh, there's this storm. Okay, so now I'm remembering what happens in this episode. See, there's just like a lot that goes on in this episode, and it's too much to keep track of in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
But basically, this time period and the 21st century are kind of like colliding. And so there's these storms every now and again that kind of mess up the time space continuum. And so they lose their queen, who in this universe is Hela.
Mm.
So they lose their queen, so they pull Peggy Carter from the 21st century to be like, "Hey, you need to help us get our queen back." And she keeps trying to do that, but she keeps failing, so she needs the help of like the Avengers, obviously. And so we get this old-timey Tony Stark who's a genius but doesn't have any of the technology he needs to actually invent anything. We have Bruce Banner who's kind of like a Hulk, but he's not like a mindless Hulk. He's got his wits about him. Um, and then the best part of this episode for me personally was Roger's Hood, who's this sexy little crime fighter who's stealing from the rich and
Okay.
giving to the poor.
All right.
I'm like, okay, Roger's Hood, he was hot. I'm gonna say it like it is. He was a hot character, and the fact
Mm.
that Peggy like looked at him and wasn't immediately like, "Okay, great. Found everything I need here. I'm staying in this universe forever. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good." She was like, "Huh, but you're not my scrawny little Steve in the Hydra Stomper." And so and I'm like, "Girl, Roger's Hood is the clear choice here." But
The clear
anyway,
number one draft pick.
um, so it was interesting though. So we do get some what am I saying? Easter eggy things that happen here.
Mhm.
While Rogers Hood and Captain Carter are talking, he's like, "Oh, tell me about the Steve Rogers in your universe because like my Peggy Carter's dead." And she says, "No, I don't think I will," which reminded me of when Sam Wilson
Yeah.
asked
Ask Joe Biden.
old
Oh, sorry, Steve
asked
Rogers. Yeah.
asked Joe Biden at the end of Endgame, like, "Oh, tell me about the girl." And he's like, "No, I don't think I will," which I thought was cute.
Yeah.
We get the title of the show name dropped in this episode when Peggy Carter and the Watcher are talking because they're best buds still. The Watcher
Yeah.
and Peggy Carter are like
I think
this,
the
and
Watcher's got a little
I'm kind
crush.
of obsessed.
I think
I'm
the
kind
Watcher's I think Watcher's like kind of like the Bruno. Like he likes her, but she's
of
not
obsessed.
as into him.
Well, listen, he doesn't interact with many other people. He
No.
really only spends his time with Peggy Carter.
Like, I'm
So
not gonna watch, I'm gonna see. And she's like,
yeah, I'm like,
okay,
but you're called the Watcher, dude. What
bruh,
that line didn't
bruh.
make any sense to me.
No, I know. He's great too. Jeffrey
Um,
Wright is just so good. But
no, he's great. And I really want to see American Fiction, just side note.
oh my
Um,
god, it's great. Yeah, it's great.
I've been updating my letterbox still. I
I
did
know.
all
Well,
my
the funny thing, I was gonna talk to you because I think I think you did a diary log instead of a review, so it looks like you watched 16 movies yesterday. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
texted you in
yeah.
the Discord. I was like, "Did you watch 16 movies?"
Oh,
But then I
no.
realized that you were
Those
just
are all the
logging
movies
them.
that I
But
watched in 2023. I
yeah,
just logged them
no,
all
I
at
know
once,
it's
but I guess
great.
that's not how I'm supposed to do it.
No, I mean, like, you could just, like, review them on their own, but, like, when you, like, log them, they make you put a date. So just go through your AMCA list app and just check when you watched them and just edit the date.
Oh, I
That's
can change the date?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Oh, okay, cool.
yeah.
Then I'll do that.
But I was very excited to see all your reviews, but, yeah, we'll cross some more off
Thank
the
you.
list. We need to watch Oppenheimer. I own it now, so, like, let's plan a movie night,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
you need to watch it. Yeah.
for sure. Um, and so we find out that the reason why these time, space, time, whatever storms are happening in this universe is that there's a person who's kind of trapped in limbo, who's running around wreaking havoc. And we find out that it is Steve Rogers from Infinity War who he went after Thanos to attack him with his shield, but instead of hitting Thanos or any other thing, he only hits the time stone. So he kind of knocks the time stone out of the
Yeah.
gauntlet and gets like trapped in
I
it.
thought
So
that
he's
was
like
cool.
running through space and time. I thought that
Yeah,
it was
and I thought it
also
was a
really
cool
cool.
reveal too. But the
Yeah.
only thing is it led to another moment of, do
Yeah.
I want to say goodbye to him again? Or do I?
No,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was like, oh my
Yeah,
god, like
yeah,
how many
yeah.
times? Then we see the third time. We'll get there, but oh
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Anyway,
also another Easter egg that I caught on to was that Hulk at some point says puny god,
mm,
which is obviously an iconic quote. And I also love that like Loki's kind of useless in this one. He's just like an actor trying to like perform Shakespeare. And for
which is great.
anyone who's a little theater nerd like we are, or just like Shakespeare, I love how Loki's kind of obsessed with Iago in this episode from Othello
Yes.
because Iago's kind of this like skeevy little like you
Oh
don't
yeah.
really know where he's just like there to like mess things up and be mischievous. Like he pretty much is the Loki in Shakespeare. So I love
Yeah.
that
Right.
he had this like connection with Iago. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, and so she and Peggy ends up getting a gauntlet of her own and ends up like destroying that version of Steve that's running through time and space and is able to save um that universe. And at the end of this episode, um the Watcher's like, so are you ready to go home now? Are you done intervening? And then, oh no, at the end of this episode, Doctor Strange comes to talk to Peggy
Mhm.
and is like, hey, I need your help with something. And
Yes.
then and then this leads us into episode 9.
Yes.
Strange it
Which
What if Strange Supreme intervened?
Which I think I liked more than you, only because I like the action. Like I did find it kind of fun, and I liked how we had Kahori back. But the thing
Mhm.
is, again, with the Captain Carter and Cap, like they really forced it this time, where she wakes up and she's like, "Wait, is this you, Steve? Is this real?" And it's like, "Ha, no,
Right.
it's me, Doctor Strange." I'm like, "Oh my god!"
Right, right,
And it was just so much going
right.
on. In this. Like there was just so much, and the Killmonger's there. It was again, this I'm more talking about it, the more I hate it, just like all these random things happening, and it's almost like too much. This is my worry of Secret Wars. Like the fact that we're getting Secret Wars is like every character in the MCU ever from every timeline, Toby and Andrew, all the old X-Men, new X-Men, all the blah 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 blah. That's my
Yeah.
biggest worry about Secret Wars. It's gonna become this, where it's just like characters are popping up out of the blue, coming in
Okay.
out of nowhere. There's all these explosions. There's 40,000 strangers, 40,000 Kevin Captain Carter's, like, Kevin
40,000 Kevin Feige's all fighting.
I just like it was a lot. It was sensory overload. There was the last one I watched. I
Yeah.
watched it about 3 a.m. because uh, I was gonna spend my morning watching the last few, but then we pushed our recording time earlier. So I was like, I had to finish these tonight, and I was watching it late at night. I was like, am I just tripping out? Am I like,
Yeah.
are the edibles kicking in, or am I
Yeah.
just like, what is going on? Wow.
Um,
Well, anyway, you talk about it.
so What's okay, the biggest problem for me with this episode and this character is that he's still trying to do the same bullshit where he's trying to bring Christine back from life. We had a whole episode about this
Right,
in season 1. I don't
and it was
need to
great.
explore
I
this
don't need it
plot
again
line
though.
anymore. Exactly. It was good for what it was, and now they've, like, ruined it. That episode has, like, lost all meaning to me because he's, like, back trying to, like, bring Christine back and her universe back, and it's just I'm like, "Okay, this is so stupid." Like, they shouldn't have if they really wanted to do, like, an interconnecting big villain thing like they did with the Ultron thing in season 1, they should have picked someone else, or they shouldn't have just done it at all because this was just so, like, boring and lame to me, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Lots of Easter eggs to talk about with this one, though, so I'll just rattle them off really quickly. Um, in the beginning, when Stephen Strange is explaining to Peggy Carter what he needs, like we see he takes us into this like separate room where he has all these villains kind of trapped in the time balls or whatever they're called. And that's the best way I can describe it.
The time balls.
The
I
time
yeah.
balls.
At
And
first, I was like, "Oh my god, I need to look at each one," and I was like, "I don't have time
yeah,
for
no,
this."
I'm not doing that.
I thought I saw Green Goblin in there, but I think it was what's his name, Cole Obsidian,
Oh, maybe.
or
Yeah.
whoever the elf-looking one is. Is that Cole Obsidian or is that Corvus Glaive?
Uh, Ebony Maw?
No, no, Ebony Moss
No, not
Squidward, and
yeah.
then there's a
The
big one
elf
and
looking
a
one,
little one. Who's the
I
big
think
one?
the big one? I think that's Cole Obsidian is the big,
Okay,
big
so
one.
Corvus Glade is is the
Is the
one.
brother who's like,
Yeah, yeah, he's the
Proxima
elfy
Midnight's
one.
brother or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. That's who I thought Green Goblin was. I was like, "Oh my god!" And then I was like, "No."
Gotcha. So he's like, "Hey, one of the bad people that I'm trying to entrap escaped, and I need you to go get them." So he sends her to like a different time period where Hydra wins World War II and takes over the planet and destroys the planet in the process. So we get this shot of Mount Rushmore, which is just the Red Skull's head, um, which was the first thing I noticed. Oh, also, um, when Peggy guesses, like, "Oh, let me guess, some one of them escaped." He's like, "Oh, how'd you know?" And she's like, "Well, Gremlins, Alien, and Jurassic Park. Like, if you're gonna entrap these things, they're bound to escape." And I just thought that
That's funny.
that was funny to drop those movies. Um, and so she is able to find Kahori, who explains to her, like, "Hey, I'm not the bad guy here. He is. He's trying to entrap all of us because he's trying to feed us to the forge, which is gonna make him stronger, which is gonna bring his universe back or whatever the fuck." I don't know. And so and so he ends up, trapping both of them. He's like, "Ah, Peggy, thanks for leading her to me, and now I'm gonna fucking kill her or whatever." And Peggy's like, "No, no, no, we're not doing this again." So then we go through um oh yeah, so then Peggy, in order to stop Doctor Strange, frees all of the bad people because he's like, "Oh, this will keep him busy." So then we see a cowboy Loki, we see a Star Lord, we see an Abomination, we see a Captain Marvel, a Proxima Midnight, Dragon from The Legend of the Ten Rings, a Vision. I saw a rocket. We see that, that big robotic rocket,
Mhm.
and a dark elf I noticed in the background. We go through a room where we're fighting with the Baba Yaga, the Scarlet Witch from the Zombies episode that Kurt coined the Baba Yaga, and I loved saying that, so I'm gonna say it again, Baba Yaga. Um, and then we're fighting all the zombies, but then Hela shows up, and obviously she's the goddess of death, so she's able to control all of the zombies. But then Surtur shows up, and then they start fighting, and then we go into a different room where Thanos is there with the gauntlet, but then he gets dusted because Killmonger shows up, and he also has the stone, so he's like, "Okay, just this guy, let's go." And then Kahori's just able to murk or no, she sends Killmonger to a different area so that they can get the stones, so that they can use the stones against Doctor Strange or Evil Strange or whatever is whatever. Um,
Supreme
and
Strange.
so
I don't know.
and so basically they end up stopping him
Yeah,
because
finally for good.
we saved the day. And the Watcher takes Peggy to the universe where Christina's alive. And it's like, okay, so now that you know that this one is safe, but like he created it, but he can never live in it because he ends up dying, almost sacrificing himself because he's able to kind of like branch out of his evil, strange persona and like whatever falls into the forge, whatever it was. And so the Watcher finally asks, like, oh, are you ready to go home now? Like, can I take you back to your universe? And she's like, you know what? Why don't we take the scenic route? And so we kind of
Season
end with
3. Yeah.
this season 3
Yeah.
of probably being like Peggy Carter jumping from universe to universe. And honestly, I like it because I like Peggy Carter and I like the Watcher, and I'm happy to explore anything that Peggy Carter does.
Yeah.
And
No, it's
so
a cute first
that's
date
my
for the two of them.
takeaway.
Yeah, no, I thought this season, yeah, the more we're talking about it, the more I'm like, there are no episodes here I'm super passionate about. Even the Kahori one, like I have my issues with just because of where
Right,
it falls and stuff. So yeah, I
right,
don't think this is as strong as the first season. Because when you're talking about the first season, like the zombies episode and the Doctor Strange episode to me are still two all-time Marvel episodes. Whereas here, I don't
right.
think there were any of those for me personally. So let's rank these though, because it's fun to
Yeah.
rank them. My lowest in number 9 is the Hela episode, just because didn't
My
really work for
number
me.
9 is our last episode, the what if Doctor Strange took control or whatever the
Gotcha.
fuck.
Yeah, my number 8 is the Grandmaster one with the
My
hammer.
number 8 is the
All
Grandmaster.
right, my number 7 is the finale that you were talking about.
Okay. My number 7 is the Hella episode.
All right, so we got the same bottom 3. Woo, woo, woo. My number 6 is Nebula with the
My
double.
number 6 is 1602.
Oh, okay, okay. My number 5 is the Captain Carter one, her solo one with the Steve, the Winter
That's
Soldier.
upsetting.
I know,
My
I'm
number
sorry.
5 is episode 1, the Nebula episode.
Okay. My number 4 is the Star Lord as a kid one.
My number 4 is the If Happy Hogan Saved Christmas
Okay,
episode.
that's my number 3. What's your number
Okay.
3?
My number 4, my number 3, our 3 and 4 are flipped. My number 3 is the Peter Quill episode.
Okay, my number 2 is actually the 1602, just because I think it's a fun place for these
Interesting. I
characters to
love
live.
that for you,
But
Dill.
yeah,
My number 2 is the Winter Soldier episode.
okay.
Peggy Carter,
And we
whatever the
got
name.
the same number 1. Yeah, obviously.
Kahori for the
Kahori,
win.
baby. Yeah. So there we go. That's our ranking. That's our. Oh my god, I just
Our
realized I gotta go to
thoughts.
work. Oh, not
I'm
right
going
now,
back to
but yeah,
bed.
I know, right? You should go back to bed. But thanks for watching, everyone. Next week we'll be talking about Echo episode uno. I think there's gonna be 6 episodes or not. I think it's 6, right? Or 9. I don't know. I think it's 6.
Oh,
But
probably
we're
6.
gonna do individual episodes. So we're gonna do. I know they're all dropping at once, so we may watch them. I'm not gonna watch them all at once. I'm gonna watch one a week,
Yeah,
just because
no.
I want to
Ours
embrace
do
the
weekly.
episodic nature, like
Yes.
even though there may be some spoilers that come out, whatever, but I am going to watch one at a time. So we're gonna do one at a time here. We'll have our trivia match at the end of the month. Next month at some point we're gonna have to Kelsey's gonna drag me to the theater to see Madam Web because I'm not gonna go willingly. And
Hell
then we'll
yeah.
talk about that. Big year ahead though. Deadpool 3 coming in this year, which is gonna shake things up. What else are we getting this year? Anything else?
I don't know.
There must be something, right?
I can't look beyond this month,
Yeah,
Dill, so don't
I know.
ask me about
It's
the
okay.
year. I have
It's
no
okay.
idea.
Maybe a few days off compared to because like we really go nonstop. Maybe we'll have a few vacation days in our future, just because we deserve it. All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. You can find us down there. We didn't do plugs, but I got to go to work. So bye, y'all.